Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So today's video is going to be a little different. I want to talk to you guys about my experience with having and recovering from a C-section. Okay, so the morning that I woke up in labor, I was obviously in an extreme amount of pain. It was the worst pain I ever felt, probably neck and neck with the time that I touched the lionfish. You know what? I'm not even about to get into that story right now. Anywho, yes, I woke up in an extreme amount of pain. I just knew that this morning, like, it was definitely real. It was real contractions. It was not Braxton Hicks contractions. I knew that morning when I woke up, it was time. My mom finally comes upstairs and sees what's going on. She sees I'm in a lot of pain, and she's like, all right, come on, like, it's time to go. Let's head to the hospital and see what they say. Took my shower, which was one of the most painful showers I ever took, standing up, and I'm contracting every 2 minutes. It was terrible. So finally, we're on the road, headed to the hospital, and every bump that we went over was ridiculous. Like, oh my gosh. And I'm looking over at my mom like,
can you please stop going over the bump?
And you know, she's looking at me like,
I'm going over the bumps on purpose.
We finally get to the hospital. I get out the car, and the contractions are so bad at this point that I can't even walk to the door to get into the hospital. Some guy that was walking out seen me crying in tears, can't move, and he went back in and came out with a nurse. He brought me a wheelchair, and my mom and the nurse, they wheeled me up to the floor that I needed to be on. They took me into the room. They checked me, and I was 3 centimeters dilated, which was pretty shocking to me because the day before I had a doctor's appointment, and when they checked me, the doctor told me that I was just thinning, that I wasn't dilated, so just be patient. And for them to tell me that I was 3 centimeters dilated already was, it was exciting. I was nervous. It was just a lot of mixed emotions all, you know, in that particular moment. Those contractions hurt so bad. And for all the women who have had babies, have children, you know exactly what I'm talking about. At this point, it was real. The doctors told me that I was going to stay. They were going to take me to the labor and delivery floor, and that, you know, I was going to be having my baby. Walking down to the hospital room, it was like one of the longest walks. Now that I think about that walk, it wasn't as far from the room that I was already in, but the contractions coming every 2 minutes and me having to stop and just breathe in and out to catch my breath and just try to fight through that pain, it made it seem like the longest walk I ever took in my life. And on top of that, you know, the doctor walking me to the room was asking so many questions, like,
Please, just take me to the room.
So I finally get to the room. I'm laying in the bed, and I'm pushing through these contractions for as long as I can. And my goal was to go natural. That was my ultimate goal. I wanted to go natural. I did not want to have the epidural. But as time went on and the contractions started to get more and more severe, when they offered me to get the epidural, I just went right on ahead. I just jumped right into it. Like, I wanted it. There was no more convincing me otherwise. I just wanted the epidural. And I wish I would have tried a little harder, but at that time, it was just too painful for me to bear. So I got the epidural. After I got the epidural, it was definitely a more relieving feeling. I did not feel any more of the pain. I felt like I could actually close my eyes and get some rest. But it was also a weird feeling not being able to feel my legs, not being able to feel my lower body move, period. Like even trying to laugh, like I couldn't feel that gut feeling that you use to talk and laugh. Like it just was not there. I was kind of just laying there, just numb. My mom would tell me this way before I went into labor, that the longer you contract and you go without the epidural, the faster the process will go. But the pain I just couldn't bear it. So when I got the epidural, it did actually slow down the process and everything started to move extremely slow. And by the time I got to 6 centimeters dilated, I stayed at 6 centimeters dilated for hours. They told me that the baby's head was bent in the birth canal, and that if her head didn't move and straighten out, that I was gonna have to have a C-section. It was scary to think of because I just did not want to have a C-section. I've heard about other people and their stories and having C-sections, and I just did not want to have one. I wanted to deliver my baby vaginally. That was what I was going for, was a vaginal delivery. So, you know, they said they were going to come back within like an hour and see, you know, the process, and if it was still the same, I was going to have a C-section. They come back and they check. The baby's head is still bent in the birth canal. The doctors talk amongst each other for a little bit, and then they tell me like, okay, like they're going to be preparing and setting up for me to have a C-section. And that was when it started to get real for me. I was pretty scared, but you know, this is what they have to do to get my child here, so there was nothing else I could do. My mom was going to be the one in the room with me during the process, so they gave her her gown to put on. They gave me my little hat and everything that I needed to put on, and it was time to wheel me down to the room to have my procedure done. Once I got into the room, I remember being placed on the table for the procedure, and the light hanging over me was just extremely bright. And I was already numb from the epidural, but then I was even more numbed from the anesthesia that they gave me, and I was really fighting hard on not going to sleep. I wanted to be awake. I wanted to be alert. I was just really scared, and I did not want to fall asleep. 5 minutes after being in the room, my mom finally came in. That was so relieving, just seeing a familiar face. And I remember just grabbing and holding on to her hand, and we were just talking, basically just trying to distract myself from this process. So finally, as the process is going on, my mom, she was like, well, it's time. And I remember I was just sitting there just kind of looking. And then I felt this pressure. Like, that was the only thing I felt during that process, was the pressure and the digging. And then finally, I heard my baby's cry, and it was amazing. So after the baby was born, it was time for me to go to the recovery room to start recovering from the major surgery that I had. So I get to the room, and I'm still attached. I still have these like weights, that's what they felt like to me, attached to my ankles, which were like pumping on my legs. They were like pumping. I kept those on all night. And the next day, I asked my nurse that was coming in to check if I could take them off. And she was like, yeah, of course you can take them off. She was like, once you take those off, we're going to remove the catheter, and you're going to have to start going back and forth to the bathroom by yourself. I ended up having to have 2 blood transfusions because during the process of having the cesarean section, I lost 2 liters of blood. So by the time I got to the recovery room, I was very droopy and drowsy, and I had to be monitored like very carefully because I was just so drugged and so weak. Finally getting to the after effects of recovering from the C-section is once the medicine started to wear off is when I really started to feel the pain of the surgery, and it was very, 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 very painful. I felt all the pain down in the lower area of my stomach where I was cut, but right here in the right section of my stomach was where it was like the most painful. It was like this burning sensation every time I would stand up or sit down. It was like the inside of my stomach was on fire. Like getting in and out of the bed was a process. Going to and from the bathroom was a process. The showers was a process. Everything was a process. It was just so painful. And I was constantly taking pain medicines to just not feel the pain. It was just terrible. Finally, it was time to go home after being at the hospital for 5 days. I was just ready to get out of there, ready to take my baby home, just ready to go home and just finally get into the groove and get into a routine of being a new mommy. And I just was ready to take my baby home. That process begins of recovering at home. There was this smell that was coming off of me. It was a very sour, stinky smell, and it was coming from the open wound, like the surgery cut. It was coming from that. And so no matter how many showers I took, there was always this weird smell. And so I just had to constantly take showers to at least keep it down so it wouldn't be too bad. You want to finish off the video with me? I'm talking about everything that I went through to get you here. Outside of the smell that was coming off from the cut, I end up breaking out in this very extreme red rash. It was all over my arms, it was all over my legs, and it was very, very itchy, and it started to burn after a while. It itched so bad. So I went to the doctor. I went to 2 different doctors, and they didn't know what it was. They said that it couldn't have been from having the blood transfusions because it had already been too far along after the process was done. So they felt like that couldn't have triggered it. Even though I felt like that was a reason, they said that that couldn't have been a reason. So that was that. And one of the doctors ended up giving me some type of itch relief medicine, which it did not help. It made my breast milk production really, really low, and that's what I was feeding my child. I was trying to do strictly breast milk, no formula. So I just end up having to stop taking the medicine and fight through the itch of just not scratching it, just leaving it alone, and taking a lot of showers. And something that I did use, I feel like helped me through that process, which is African Black soap. I will definitely talk about that in another video. But that was something else I dealt with during the process of coming home. And then I dealt with my feet swelling really bad. My calves down to my feet, they just swole. They just got really big and swollen, and I would soak my feet in warm water, and then I just sat them back up leveled, and the swelling just kind of went down on its own. Okay, so me today, so basically almost a year later through everything that I've told you guys about, and honestly I feel a lot better as far as weight is concerned, because I did get really big through that process. My weight before pregnancy was 124, and my weight at the end of my pregnancy was 197, I believe. So almost 200 pounds, really big. I'm a very short person. I'm only 5 feet tall. So that was a lot of weight on my small little body. So I've actually lost an extreme amount of weight. Breastfeeding is one of the things that helped me out with that a lot. And if you are someone that, if you're pregnant, you're wondering how you're gonna lose all of your baby weight, breastfeeding is definitely #1. You're just gonna burn a lot of calories with breastfeeding, and it's a beautiful thing. I love it. I still have a little bulge in my stomach because all the stretching that occurred while I was pregnant, and then of course having the C-section, I ended up forming a hernia. So that just means that your belly button is poking out. What I go through today is I still go through having extreme back pains. Some days I feel regular, and some days I wake up with pain in my mid to lower back, and it just comes from the C-section, and of course having the epidural. You know, you will have after effects of that. But that was my story on having and recovering from a C-section. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and listening to me talk. I would really appreciate if you guys go and subscribe, go check out my other videos, leave comments down below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.